We have a wonderful group of panelists here to discuss their programs and start some conversations around enforcement. We may still have some folks joining in, but we'll go ahead and get started. Darren, will you please go to the next slide? Oh, I'm sorry. Go back to that one. Perfect. So I wanted to go over a couple of webinar logistics to begin with, starting with the question and answer session process. Please type a summary of your question into the Q&A pane. That button should be located at the bottom of your screen. While you may use the chat pane to share information or resources with other participants, please do not put your questions into the chat. If you do not see the Q&A pane, please make sure you have the most updated version of Zoom. Once called upon, please unmute yourself and state your name, affiliation, and restate your question when asked by CalRecycle staff. If it is geared toward a specific panelist, please note that, and we will make sure it gets to them. You may also request peer share requests, feedback, and panelist questions to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov using the subject line SB 1383 chat with CalRecycle. If you cannot unmute yourself or were unable to submit your question, please also submit those questions to the SLCP inbox, and we will have our land representative get back to you in a timely manner. For our first panelist, we have our very own Carla Miller from the Local Assistance and Market Development Branch to go over jurisdiction enforcement requirements. Darren, next slide, please. All right, Carla, take it away.
There we go. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. As Alexis mentioned, to start things off, I'm just going to share a brief overview of the jurisdiction enforcement requirements. So as of January 1, 2022, jurisdictions were required to adopt an enforcement ordinance or other enforceable mechanism. For almost 2 years now, jurisdictions have been focused on monitoring compliance and providing education and outreach materials to those entities not complying, with the goal of ensuring every generator has an opportunity to comply before mandatory jurisdiction enforcement becomes effective. Compliance monitoring includes the following. Number 1, conducting annual compliance reviews of commercial businesses generating 2 cubic yards or more of solid waste per week. This also includes multifamily dwellings of 5 units or more. These can be paper audits to verify services provided or that businesses are complying through self-hauling. Number 2, monitoring contamination for 3+, 3, or 2 container collection service. This may be done utilizing route reviews or waste evaluations or both. When contamination is found, jurisdictions are required to provide education and outreach to those generators. Number 3, conducting inspections of Tier 1 commercial edible food generators, and in 2024, conducting inspections of Tier 2 commercial edible food generators. An inspection includes verifying they have written arrangements with a food recovery organization or food recovery service, and verifying they are recovering the maximum amount of edible food. Beginning January 2024, jurisdictions must take progressive enforcement action against non-compliant organic waste generators and commercial edible food generators, with the exception of local education agencies and non-local entities, since these entities are under CalRecycle's purview for enforcement. When a jurisdiction determines a violation occurred, it is required to issue a notice of violation within 60 days of determining a violation. If after 60 days the entity is still not in compliance, the jurisdiction shall impose penalties. A jurisdiction may extend the deadline in the notice of violation if the jurisdiction finds that compliance is impractical due to extenuating circumstances beyond the control of the entity. Examples of extenuating circumstances include acts of God, such as earthquakes, wildfires, flooding, and other emergencies or natural disasters, delays in obtaining discretionary permits or other government agency approvals, or deficiencies in organic waste recycling capacity infrastructure or edible food recovery capacity, and the relevant jurisdiction is under a corrective action plan due to those deficiencies. The progressive approach allows for notification to the generator and provides time for the generator to comply before penalties are required to be issued by the jurisdiction. The regulations set a minimum penalty amount of $50 for the first offense and can go up to $500 per violation. These are minimum standards, and jurisdictions have the flexibility to develop their own enforcement process within these parameters. Lastly, before I pass this back to Alexis, I just want to share that we are working on an enforcement guidance document for jurisdictions and hope to have it posted on our website soon. Back to you, Alexis.
All right, thank you, Carla, for that presentation. I would like to now open it up to our first Q&A session. Darren, next slide. Again, we will use the Q&A pane to address questions. Once we get your question, CalRecycle staff will unmute you. Please again state your name, affiliation, and question. If you cannot unmute yourself or were unable to get your question answered by the end of the session, please send your question to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov with the subject line SB 1383 Chat with CalRecycle. With that, I will go ahead and pass it to Katie. I'm not sure if we have any questions yet.
I'm not seeing any in the Q&A panel just yet. I also don't see any mistakenly placed in the meeting chat either. Oh, here we go. Here is one. I have a question from Eliza Krasinski. Give me just a moment to find your name in the list. And all right, Eliza, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please state your name and affiliation and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, everyone. Eliza Krasinski in King County, Washington. I was wondering if you could speak more to the mechanism for, jurisdictions or whatever the local authority is to work with haulers to identify violations. If we're talking about, like flipping lids and similar things. Are there specific requirements for haulers to work with those authorities? Thanks.
Hey, thank you for that question. I'll go ahead and respond. So the way the regulations are designed, jurisdictions can delegate certain responsibilities to their haulers. So when it comes to, for example, contamination monitoring, a jurisdiction is allowed to designate to the hauler to conduct those lid flips, right? And also to provide education back to the generator if they were found to be contaminating a container. So depending on what the activity is, it may or may not be able to be delegated. So the actual issuance of notices of violations and any associated penalties can only be conducted by the jurisdiction. They can't delegate that particular activity to the hauler. Does that help answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
You bet.
All right, our next question is from Honey Benjamin. Give me just a moment to ask you to unmute. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself now, Honey. Please go ahead and state your name and affiliation and then ask your question.
Sure. Name is Handy Benjamin. Work for Calaveras County Environmental Health Department. My question is, do you happen to have a SB 1383 food recovery inspection template for the jurisdictions, or?
I think I can go ahead and answer this one. I believe we don't have any official templates, but we do have some examples. If you reach out to your local assistance liaison, they should be able to help you with that. Do you have anything to add, Kara?
No, that's it, honey. After you reach out and we provide you the examples, let us know if you need anything else, because we can, peer match you with maybe another jurisdiction. So feel free to circle back after we send you the materials. Go ahead. Hey, Katie, you're on mute, it looks like.
So
Sorry, is that me? Is it Caitlin Barboza?
Yes. Oh, it looks like Connie has a follow-up
hand.
question. So let me go ahead and allow them to unmute real quick. Connie, did you have something to add?
Okay. Thank you. So should we reach out to permitting and assistance, the contact for permitting and assistance branch, or which CalRecycle branch?
Yeah, honey, you have a local assistance and market development liaison for the county. So it would be that person, and we will put into the Q&A or chat, whatever we're using, who the Calaveras County contact is. So give us a moment and we will get that done.
Thank you. That sounds perfect. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. So up next, I have a question from Caitlin Barboza. Caitlin, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question.
Yeah, thanks. My name is Caitlin Barboza with the County of San Diego, and I'm just curious if there is an expectation on CalRecycle's part that jurisdictions kind of throw the book at all of our generators and enforce all parts of SB 1383 out front, or like up front, or if we as jurisdictions can maybe focus on what we might feel like are some core programs for generators to implement, and maybe only send NOVs for certain items, maybe like not having service or not having paired bins or signage, and and maybe not focusing so much on like tenant education or something. I don't know. Just there's a lot that we could potentially enforce upon. So can we work with our ALAMD rep on that?
Yeah, let's do this because technically if you identify a violation, you should begin that enforcement process. But I do understand the need where it might be like, depending on what's going on, maybe some technical assistance is needed, and that could address the situation. So let us circle back to you because I don't want to provide a definitive answer, and it may depend a little bit. So we will tee this up and circle back to you. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Up next, I have a question from Patty Toes. Patty, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please go ahead and state your name and affiliation and ask your question.
Yes, my name is Patty Taves and I work for Aptima Environmental, and we provide consulting services for SB 1383 for a lot of clients. So I just wanted to get clarification. If a client doesn't have the bandwidth to actually physically be sending out the notice of violations, is it okay if that authority is delegated to a consultant? We have that delegation in writing. Can the consultant actually provide that service for or in lieu of or for the city or jurisdiction that we're working for?
Hey, Patty, let me look at a couple things. I may be able to get back to you during the chat, or we may have to do a follow-up. Does that sound okay?
It does. Thank you.
All right. Uh-huh.
Sorry, Tony, please go ahead and unmute, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Tony Girillo with Pacific Advanced Biosolids. And I was just really wondering if you'd be touching on anything that has to do with wastewater treatment facilities and issues with landfilling of the biosolids, or is that not, this seems to be the food recovery part of the SB 1383. We'd be touching on any of that today. Is there anybody to talk to about that?
Yeah, Tony, I mean, shoot your question to the SLCP inbox, and happy to have a follow-up conversation. We weren't necessarily today going into, I'm really talking about how jurisdictions are conducting their enforcement.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, so for wastewater treatment plants, typically, in most cases from the jurisdiction who's implementing, there isn't any enforcement that would happen. Wastewater treatment plants aren't considered a generator per se. And that has to do with the way we structured the regulation. So why don't you shoot your specific questions, and that way we can make sure we get it to the right folks, depending on what you're asking.
Right. And they'll tell me who the right folks are?
They will.
Very good. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, our last question is one I'm going to go ahead and just respond to in writing. So Alexis, if you would like to please go ahead and introduce our next speaker.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie, and thank you everyone for your questions. Darren, you can go ahead and pull up the next presentation. So we are now going to move on to our next panelist, who will be introduced by our CalRecycle staff member, Adriana.
Thank you, Alexis. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Please let me know if you cannot. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adriana Saliot, and I am the Local Assistance Liaison for the City of Patterson in Stanislaus County. I'd like to introduce Adrienne Laurel. Adrienne is Patterson's Environmental Compliance Specialist, dedicated to sustainability and community well-being. With a background in business administration and a decade of service in Patterson's Public Works Department, he ensures environmental regulations are being met. Adrian's family inspires his commitment to protect the city's environment for future generations, serving as a role model for combining expertise with responsibility. Please welcome Adrian.
Hello, everyone. Like Adriana stated, my name is Adrian. I'm with the City of Patterson, and I will be giving this next presentation. So obviously it's the SB 1383 enforcement, and this is our solid waste program. Next slide. So the purpose of this PowerPoint is to showcase the City of Patterson solid waste team's approach to enforcement practices. And our solid waste team consists of our solid waste manager, Michael Renfro, who's also on the call, and with great support of Sonia Delgado, who is our Deputy Director of Regulatory Compliance, and myself, the Environmental Compliance Specialist that deals solely with solid waste. Next slide, please. So our current waste collection, we have our franchise hauler, who's Bertolotti Disposal. We've been working with Bertolotti for as long as I've known, and I've been here for 10 years, and I've also been living here since I was a kid. So they've been around for a long time, and our director, Mike Willett, has been great, knowing that there was some type of regulation that was going to come down the pipeline in regards to the separating of recycling, organic recycling, and regular trash. So we've had a 3-cart system for forever. And for instance, I lived in Ceres for a few years, and they were in the 2-cart system, and they just adopted the 3-cart system. So it could be a challenge breaking obviously different approaches, like now adding a new can. So I'm glad we have that already. And then our commercial businesses, we offer 2 to 6 yard bins, and they also have the ability to add a 3-cart system to that. And I just want to take note of a process that we implemented when I first came on is we do an annual service audit. So we work with our finance team down on the first floor, and we generate a report of all the commercial businesses that have 2 to 6 yard services. And out of those businesses, what we like to do is we cross-reference to make sure that, for instance, if they have a 4-yard garbage bin, then they need to have a recycling program. And if they don't, that's how we're able to dictate our enforcement, or we start with outreach first. So that does a great job catching all of them, because there are times, for instance, where finance will, or a commercial business will request for service, and it doesn't always get routed to us. Obviously, there's those discrepancies, so we're able to catch those when we do this annual service audit. Next slide. So here's our inspection schedule, and it's based off of our city garbage route. So when we do residential, for instance, those days that they're out, obviously route 1's on a Friday. Those are the days that we go out, which is myself. I'll be out there from 5 to 7 in the morning, just picking random streets, and just say like it's one street, I could pop maybe 3 to 5 lids depending on it. So it's also based on the contamination level for that specific street. So like for January, we do route 1 and 2, and then we always do a follow-up the following month. And obviously we're still in the education aspect of this whole program. So all of the courtesy notice that are issued, they're just all courtesy notices, but we're obviously trying to implement the understanding of the courtesy notice, because once 2024 comes around, obviously there'll be the fine schedule associated with it. And one of the ones that works really well is, for instance, if you look at April, we do transfer station visits. So Bertolotti's transfer station is in Modesto, so it's not too far from us, about half an hour. So we go out, and the trucks that come in, we could kind of see when they dump, how contaminated they are. And if they're extremely contaminated, obviously we'll know what specific route they're from, and we'll target that specific route and provide them education and outreach, which we'll go over a little bit later through letters, or we use our social media, Facebook platform a ton for education and outreach. And obviously there's more follow-up. And in October, we do the commercial and multifamily inspections, and then follow up in November. Next slide. So here are some of our inspections that I've gone out in the mornings. So here's a couple pictures of the residential. Obviously just pop some lids, and you notice the one on the left it had a ton of food inside of it. So we provide pictures, and I'll go over the door hanger on the next slide, but that house will get issued a door hanger. The one next to it, they overfilled their organic bin with organic material, but then they put the rest in the blue and the black. Obviously we don't want any organics going to the landfill, so they'll get a courtesy notice. And then we do the same with the commercial and multifamily, as you can see on the right hand side. And when we do the commercial and multifamily, what I've found to be very efficient, at least for us, is that typically when you leave a door hanger, you probably have like a regular worker working there. So I tried to give the door hanger and then set up a meeting with the business owner or manager to go over our program, right? So that seems to be working a ton. It is a little bit more work, but it's been effective. And a little thing that's worked for us also is there's an app called Timestamp. If you look at the bottom left, obviously I deleted the addresses associated to these pictures for the confidentiality of the people, but it's great because when you're there, you take the picture with the app and it logs the time, the address, so that in case there's any disputes, you have your backup with this app. So just an FYI. Next slide. So for our record keeping, we use mobile MMS, which is a cloud-based mobile maintenance management with built-in work order management, a workflow archiving and reporting tools, as well as GIS and map-based interface. So through MMS, it's been great. We have all of our recycling contaminators in there, and we're also able to archive all the violations depending on month, fiscal year, calendar year, however we want to do it. And we're able to track the stages of progress and fines to see how we're doing. And in regards to the edible food, we're able to we have it saved in like tier 1 and tier 2, and then there are contracts and written agreements associated with that specific commercial business. And we also have this form, which I kind of regret not having it on here, but it's a mandatory compliance recycling form that whenever a business signs up for, or we have a new business license, they have to fill out this compliance recycling form stating if they're going to be generating over 4 yards of service or 20 gallons of organic material per week. And if they, for example, they state yes on everything, and they go to request service and it doesn't match what they're saying on there, we catch that before we approve it on the business license. So that's been helping a ton when there's new businesses coming into town. And if you look on the right, I know it doesn't look like a door hanger, but it is a door hanger. That's our solid waste program door hanger or violation notice. That's been great. So for instance, if you have a bunch of food in your black bin, I come out, I take pictures, I write in all the information, and I leave the door hanger on the door. And what I like about this QR code, it takes you to our website and it gives you the illustration of what goes in each specific bin. You saw it on slide number 3. It's a little cheat sheet for them, and it allows them to kind of see what it is that they're doing. And in case they have disputes, I just ask them for their email and I send them those pictures that I use with timestamps. So that's been great. And it just gives them a lot of helpful information, especially when they click on their QR code. With the technology that we have now, everybody has a phone. They could just scan the QR code and we're ready to go. Next slide. So our edible food recovery inspections, at the moment, we have 5 tier 1 generators. We just added a grocery outlet, so we're at 5, and we have 12 tier 2 generators. And again, we use MMS to hold all of the contracts or in agreements, along with the record keeping, which are the tonnages of all the edible food that's being donated. And a big component to our program that Michael and I and Sonia pride ourselves on is the education and outreach. The last thing we want to do is, for instance, start issuing fines or start getting courtesy notice, and then they're like, I don't even know what this program is. So obviously we focused all on the last 1.5 years, just doing our best to educate everybody, because there's a lot of components to this law. So we want to make sure we're hitting it from all angles, because again, if there's backlash, then it goes to our council meetings. And then when it goes to our council meetings, it goes to our director, and then it goes down to me. So we do our best to pride ourselves. So that's why when it came to edible food, we wanted to make sure that we had that covered. So we sent emails, I met in person, and I had a tracking sheet where I documented all my inspection or meetings, who I talked to. And then we also did certified mail letters, and we'd make sure that the information that they're getting, they're actually reading it, right? So if you look on the right, it's just an example of one of the letters that Michael and I drafted when it came to a tier 1 generator that was just, they just kept dodging me every single time. And what made it difficult too, there was a language barrier, but that's a good little, an example of how we run our program. We go through the email, in-person meeting, certified letter before we go to enforcement. When we issue letters that has our fine schedules associated with it. And obviously we had buy-in from our director to then go to the city manager to be like, hey, FYI, this is coming down the pipeline in case you receive any backlash from council or residents or commercial owners. Next slide. So here's our mandatory organic waste disposal reduction ordinance. So this is our teeth, our enforcement, right? It's essentially our fine schedule. First violation is a courtesy notice. Even though we've had multiple offenders in the last 2 years, they keep continuing to get a courtesy notice, because in our municipal code, we will start enforcement in 2024. So again, we're doing our best to just provide as much outreach and education as we can. Second violation is $100. Third violation is $200, and our fourth violation is $500. And again, we haven't got to it, but based on working in water conservation before this, we're pretty lenient when it comes to fines when they get to the larger amounts. But again, if they're just not caring, or they're not showing any initiative to improve, our director has no problem going down the fine schedule the way it is. Next slide. So again, we pride ourselves on education and outreach. Like that little dancing guy, we take pride in him. We just bought him. So Sonia, who's our deputy director, she's huge on outreach when it goes to different events. So solid waste, as you can see here, we have our own table that provides commercial recycling, recycling at home for the 3-cart system. And for example, we went to Sacred Heart School this year, Las Palmas Elementary, and then we have a big festival, the Apricot Fiesta, where we have a booth, Earth Day, and the big event that we had, which is this picture, is the back to school event, which was pretty cool. We used a Survey Monkey and we collected surveys, and those questions were directly tied with at-home recycling, and all the ones, for instance, that we kept getting incorrect answers. When they logged in with their email and address, and then we were able to provide them education and outreach based on those specific incorrect answers directly to those people. And the parents and the students won prizes. Like we gave away a Vitamix composter that was like $600. We provided little kitchen compost bins with the biodegradable bags, those 2-compartment trash cans inside to recycle regular recyclables. So we really pride ourselves on providing education and outreach. Next slide. And speaking of outreach, here's some more. These are just some recycling guides that I made. I got the idea from City of Turlock. And we created our own little recycling guides, and we randomly just cycle these through social media just to make sure people understand what it is they're supposed to do. Typically, people will do what they need to do as long as they know what it is. So that's why we take such pride in providing that service to our community. Next slide. Questions? That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Adrian. It's really great to see all of that outreach and kind of your approach on that. Darren, thank you for putting the Q&A slide up. We would like to open it up to our second Q&A session. Just as a reminder, please submit your question to the Q&A pane. And if you cannot unmute yourself, please submit your question to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov. Once unmuted, please state your name, affiliation, and question. Katie?
Thanks, Alexis. So up first, we have a question from Susan Contreras. Susan, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please state your name and your affiliation and ask your question.
Hi, I'm Susan Contreras with Municipal Waste Solutions. We're an environmental consultant. One of my questions was actually for the previous segment. I don't know if you want me to ask that now or not, but the one to Adrian is what I was asking what the app is that you're taking photos with.
Yes, give me a second. And it's great. I got the idea from Water Conservation because they've been doing that for such a long time. It's called Timestamp Camera app.
Timestamp. Okay, great. And then my other question, you can tell me if I shouldn't ask it now. Kara had mentioned that jurisdictions can delegate certain things. And I was wondering about waivers. We have the hauler perform the waste assessment and then we review it. Well, as a consultant, I would review it and look at the pictures and then sign it for the city. Does the city have to actually sign it, or is it okay for the consultant?
I know, speaking for our program, any type of waivers are done internally, and we input all that information into MMS also. Space exemptions, not meeting the threshold. So in regards to that, we do that internally. We don't give that responsibility to the hauler.
Okay, and maybe CalRecycle could weigh in and let me know that for overall.
Yeah, sure, Susan. Yeah, I mean it's possible. I think if you look very closely at section 18981.2, where it talks about the designation process, it would be important that is laid out very specifically. But in most cases, the jurisdiction, like who communicates the waiver is typically delegated, but usually it's the city that's issuing it. So if it's a letter, for example, that's given to, say, the business, it's a letter from the city. So that's versus you, because if like you're doing it, like you don't have the real authority per se. So again, it would be important to work with the city and their legal counsel to work that through, but just to make sure that what's being done is meeting that requirement in that section.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And thanks, Adrian. Good responses.
Thank you.
All right, up next, I have a question from Jennifer Arbuckle. Jennifer, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please state your name and affiliation and go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, my question's more for CalRecycle Group. Jennifer Arbuckle, Program Manager, Butte, the Edible Food Recovery Working Group for Butte County. I have, specifically for Tier 1 generators, the supermarkets. All of our supermarkets in our area are Feeding America partners. So they have contracts in place and are donating their, prepackaged foods, but under their contract, Feeding America does not want to get into the prepared food bracket. So under their contract, they're not allowed to use other food recovery organizations that can take that food. So they knowingly are throwing away edible food. How do we enforce on that? Does that we just go through the process, even though they have a contract in place, but are knowingly throwing away edible food on a daily basis and are saying that they can't budge in their contract because they're locked into it and Feeding America does not want that food? Hello?
Hey, sorry about that delay. I thought Katie was going to answer, so I'm going to jump in. Hey, Jennifer, thanks for that question. So those commercial edible food generators would be out of compliance.
Right.
We've had some interactions with Feeding America and would be happy to do some follow-ups. But those generators would definitely be out of compliance and need to figure it out.
That's what okay. No, that's perfect, Kara, because that's my attention too. I just wanted to make sure CalRecycle was in support of that, because my thing was, I get the corporate, they say talk to corporate. I'm like, okay, but it's against the law for you to do this. So I'm just going to go down that route. I just wanted to make sure, you guys would have our backs if we were having to go down that route. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll start working on it.
And if there's any corporate or Feeding America contacts that you want us to follow up with, because like I've said, we've had some interactions. I think Tahima was one of them. But yeah, please let us know. We're happy to help. But yep, you're spot on. Correct.
Okay. Thanks, hon.
All right. Up next, I have a question from Malika Sen. Malika, if you could please unmute yourself, state your name and affiliation, and go ahead and ask your question.
Catherine, this is Malika Sen, and I'm with Solana Center. We're an environmental nonprofit in San Diego County, servicing several cities here. And it's actually a question along the lines of what Patty had raised. So we're also consultants that help several cities. And I just kind of wanted to share our process and maybe have CalRecycle weigh in on it. This was actually something shared with us through our Department of Environmental Health, Vanessa Mello, and she gave really good guidance. She joined us in a couple inspections, and she said, what's really effective is to immediately inform the business post-inspection what they complied with and what they did not comply with. They need to see it in writing. And, so you do it to the inspection, the better. So with that guidance, we then started sending follow-up emails, giving the business, you were good with this is what need action. And it is it is education to the business, but it's not the official notice of violation. So the official notice of violation, if an action is going to be taken, will come later from the city through the formal channels. So I kind of wanted to share that and maybe get your nod that that's okay.
You got my nod. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, again, it's important that, in that section 18981.2,
Yes.
part of the regs and B, right, that, whether that's the MOU between you and the jurisdiction, that written designation needs to be kept in the jurisdiction's record. That's very important. And typically we also like the jurisdiction to send that to us, so we know that that aspect is being done, in this case by Solana Center. But your situation is a little bit different than Patty's in that you're not actually issuing the enforcement action. You've been delegated to conduct the inspection, but not conducting the enforcement. So it's slightly different nuance. And that's why for Patty's question, I have to, our team is going to do some follow-up with legal just to be sure on the response. We have, I know very clearly that enforcement cannot be delegated to private entities like the hauler, but when we're talking about a consultant, I do need to get clarification. But for your situation, you're A-okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for all you're doing. For all of you doing.
A pleasure. Catherine, I had a couple more questions further down. Shall I wait my turn, or do you just want me to ask it now?
It's much easier for us to go back and keep these questions so that they are marked with points in the video when we upload it to YouTube. So please, yeah, we'll get to yours in just a couple of minutes. Thanks, Malika.
Thank you.
All right, up next, I have a question from Paul Freund. Paul, please go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question.
Great, thank you. Paul Freund with the Tama County Solid Waste Management Agency. And just real quickly, before I get into the question for Adrian at the city of Patterson, I just wanted to address the concern that Jennifer had with Feeding America. And I think it brings up a good point, because I saw in the chat somebody else had mentioned about Feeding America as well. And I think it would be helpful to maybe get the jurisdictions together. That I think there's about 19 jurisdictions that Feeding America is a part of. CalRecycle, or at least, jurisdictions that want to participate, and CalRecycle could get together and have a chat with Feeding America to help resolve these issues, because I'm sure they're not just impacting people in Butte County and Tehama County where Feeding America operates. It may be in other counties as well. But yeah, so I'll get into the question. Adrian, as far as lid flipping, I know you go out early in the morning, 5 to 7 a.m. But what sort of response have you gotten from the public, either negative or positive, when doing your lid flips? And were lid flipping contamination monitoring part of your program prior to SB 1383? Yeah.
That's a great question, because before I started doing the SB 1383 lid flipping, I would assist when I first came on as an environmental compliance specialist with water. So we would go check for overwatering, things of that nature. So one of the things that we adopted, and it's a case-by-case basis in regards to doing the door hanger, because for instance, if I go to a house and it's like completely dark and it looks pretty sketchy, that's why that app's great. You take the pictures, I fill out my door hanger, and if it doesn't look like the friendliest approach of a home, I will go back like after my break, like 9 or 10, and drop off the courtesy notice. And what I like, that gives me the opportunity, for instance, if it's not too early, to ring the doorbell, try to have some formal conversation and education with whoever's was contaminating, right? So it's on a case-to-case basis. And no, I started doing the lid flipping once I got on with the solid waste team for SB 1383.
Okay, yeah, because I was just curious if the public was aware that people were looking in their trash prior to or if this was new to to your program with SB 1383?
Yeah, no, so before we started the lid flipping, and again, I could share my email in the chat. I could send you, we actually sent out, I created this flyer that pretty much like a heads up flyer to the community that there's going to be inspections occurring, and we put it in the newspaper. We did it in the utility newsletter for all the residents, posted it on social media, put flyers out. I did it. I was pretty big on it for my own sanity. Like, I wouldn't want somebody at my house at like 5:30 in the morning trying to put a door hanger, or who's going through my trash, especially we have somewhat of a homeless problem here in Patterson also. So those people could be seen different, and we could get associated with them and say something negative could happen. So yes, we made sure, again, education and outreach to make sure they're aware of city staff being on their property.
Okay, great. Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, up next, I have another question from Malika. Oh, looks like you're already unmuted, Malika, so please go ahead and ask your second question.
Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, Adrian, for sharing your program. It was actually very insightful, much appreciated. Quick question. Do you, for both your residential and your commercial, when you're doing your contamination checks, do you open bags, or are you just looking at it at a high level, you know, whatever the camera's catching or your eyes are catching at a high level?
I wish I had some type of AI built into my head, but unfortunately I don't. And at the moment, I think it's on a case-to-case basis, just like everything else that we do. Typically what I've noticed is the contaminators, you're able to see it from top to bottom if I was able to dump that whole tote. And that's why the transfer station visits are crucial also. So it's a case-to-case basis, but at the moment, if it's like super contaminated, I don't need to open any bags. You're able to see it right from the get-go, and the pictures are crucial. And again, obviously we're in the education aspect of it, so I'm able to deal with those residential people right away, and the commercial business owners or managers, I talk to them directly to inform them of how to properly dispose of the material generated from their business or home. So case-to-case basis, I know it's a little broad, but that's just a reality for us at the moment.
Yeah, no, actually great to hear that you're opening bags, because at least on the commercial side, we're seeing that there's a lot of contamination being sent, you know, like organics being sent to the landfill, and it's all going to be in that black bag. So if you don't open that bag, you're never going to know that that business is actually not really doing such a great job, you know? So, okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a second question. I think I'm right after. Should I just go, Catherine?
I don't see the additional question in the queue. But again, we're trying to keep these questions so that they are in order according to the order they were received. So
okay,
we will get to your question when it comes up in the queue. All right, up next, I'm going to take a question from Eliza Krasinski. Just a moment to find them. Okay, Eliza, please go ahead and unmute, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question.
Hi, Eliza Krasinski with King County again. I think my question was essentially just answered, but curious, Adrian or others, how you have addressed concerns that contamination, organic waste can't be identified if it's bagged. So what I already heard is that, there is some bag opening, but I'm not sure if that's regular or not.
Yeah, it's on a case-to-case basis. I think that's why the partnership with Bertolotti, our franchise hauler, is so crucial, because we catch a lot of that stuff at the transfer station specifically for that route. And then we'll be able to dictate if we need to go open bags, where we need to go to further identify.
Eliza, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. We'll move on to the next one. Next up is Janessa Kalanjian. Janessa, you should be able to unmute now. Please state your name and affiliation and ask your question. Okay, I guess we'll go ahead and move on then. Let's move on to, looks like Eliza Krasinski again. Eliza, please go ahead and unmute and ask your question.
Oh, thanks. This actually wasn't my question, but I saw it was in chat and not the Q&A. Julie asked this. Can Adrian explain how they developed their compliance programs? Did you use the services of a consultant or all in-house staff?
Great question. Again, I used to work in operations as a maintenance worker. So by the time I came on, we were 6 months into, I believe, 2021, and our solid waste manager at the time, Xavier, and our director, Michael, they were working hand in hand developing this program. So by the time I came on, we were in the middle of developing the municipal code and like all the little small details to how we were going to do enforcement and things of that nature. But the majority of the brainstorming was done from Xavier, the regional agency, and our director. And yeah, we managed to do everything in-house. Where City of Patterson is really well staffed and we have a lot of great people here. So that speaks of us and specifically them. But yeah, we were able to develop all the enforcement, the municipal code, everything in-house.
Thank you, Adrian. Up next, I have a question from Michelle Hunt. Michelle, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please go ahead and unmute, state your name and affiliation, and ask your question. Okay, it looks like Michelle's maybe having some difficulties unmuting. So the question was, what is your contamination level in each residential or commercial container?
I don't have those numbers specifically in front of me. Give me a moment. The one that I do know is for the transfer station, Bertolotti is able to give us reports. And for our organic, we have less than 1% contamination in the organic, just because we've had the 3-bin system for so long that people are accustomed to recycling properly for residential.
All right, that's great. Thank you, Adrian. Okay. Looks like up next, I'm not sure if we will be able to do Honey's request, as it's a little difficult with the screen share. But Honey, if you would like to follow up with our SLCP inbox, I'll go ahead and put that email address into the chat. Please go ahead and send that there. We'll forward it to Adrian, and then maybe he can just send you the pictures.
Yeah, and I think we will be posting info from the webinar today. Is that correct?
Yes, we do that. We also, once we have the link for our recording of the webinar on our YouTube channel, we typically send that out along with links to the presentations from the webinar and any other resources that we discussed during the webinar that we're able to provide links for. So we can include those with that email. All right, up next, another question from Malika. Malika, you should be able to unmute again. Please go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Catherine. Malika Sen with Solana Center. Adrian, I have a question on actions that you are taking with persistent offenders. So you have businesses who, you know, are just very ready to take the fines and are not willing to change action because it's cheaper for them to just pay the fines. So what actions do you take with them? Or have you had to take any?
No, honestly, I'm a pretty friendly person, and I take pride in charming my way through conversations when it comes to our residents and specifically our commercial customers. No, they're in the business of making money, not spending money. So they've been great. No, I haven't dealt with anybody just dealing with just paying the fines. And because essentially in our municipal code, it states it's like I could come out, say Monday, and I could come back Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday if I want. And after the fourth one, it gets to $500. But no, we haven't got to those extremes at all. And everybody's been very receptive to the law. And again, it's your approach, how you approach them, right? I played the friendly card at all times, and I do the enforcement if I have to. But no, I have not dealt with that at all yet.
Thank you.
All right, up next, we have a question from Tammy Stolzenthaler. Tammy, I'm gonna enable you to unmute. Please go ahead and state your name and affiliation and ask your question.
Good afternoon. I'm Tammy Stolzenthaler. I'm with the City of Watsonville in Santa Cruz County. And my question is, if any jurisdictions here that are also the haulers or haulers have found a suitable audit tracking program, if you can let me know in the chat what program has been working for you. I'm really looking for a program that works for tracking the audit so that I can answer the EAR questions annually for CalRecycle, and also tracking so that customer service, on the customer service end, we can see the results really easily in like an Excel format. And so far I've been making forms in-house, but I would appreciate some advice on finding a program that works for that, for the lid flip audits, and kind of monitoring how many visits we've made and just our follow-up. Thank you.
Adrian, I think you're still muted. If I can't quite tell if you're trying to speak, but
I believe that question was more associated to CalRecycle. No, like for us, we have a franchise hauler. We don't do it in-house.
okay, this sounds like something that we should maybe follow up via email. If you send this question, Tammy, to the SLCP organics box on the screen, we'd be happy to follow up with you via email. Oh, or Kara has.
Yeah, well, just thinking that I think with all the jurisdictions on the webinar today, if there are any that have suggestions, it would be great if you could share that. And Katie, okay for them to put it into the Q&A, any responses if they have a quality solid waste audit tracking form or program? Sound like a good way of sharing?
That's something that would be easier to handle via the meeting chat. We typically ask people to share resources and information in the chat, and please
Perfect.
put your questions in the Q&A so that I can keep them separate and get the questions all answered, or as many as we can manage to get to.
That
and
sounds
again, if we don't get to your question, please submit it to the SLCP inbox.
Sounds good. So everyone, please take a look at Tammy's question. If you have a quality solid waste audit tracking form or program, please provide your input in the chat so we can all share. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Kara, and thanks, Katie, for taking over that Q&A session. And thank you, everyone who asked your questions. And thank you, Adrian, for fielding those questions as well and for your presentation. In the interest of time, we would like to move to the next presentation. Thank you, Darren, for getting that up for us. With that, I would like to pass it to our CalRecycle staff member, Joanne, to introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Alexis. It's my pleasure to introduce Jennifer Gilbert. Jennifer is the Conservation Coordinator for the City of Davis, where she has worked for over 17 years, coordinating and implementing the city's solid waste program. Jennifer oversaw the 2016 introduction to the city's mandatory organics recycling program and has taken a leadership role in implementing the city's 1383 implementation efforts. Jennifer, please take it away.
Thank you, Joanne. So before I start, I just want to echo something that Adrian said. He was talking about how important it was to get in front of businesses now and, the past couple of years and let them know about enforcement, because 2024 feels like it's tomorrow when we have to do, notices of violation for the first time we catch a violation. So I echo that, and that has been our mantra as well, as you'll see through this process. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Davis's experience, how we got from receiving the huge big old packet, oh my gosh, CalRecycle, amazing job on these regulations, receiving these and going, oh my gosh, how are we going to do this, to having a program and being able to start doing enforcement. And it's not just me. I have an amazing team that is working with me, and these two folks here are some of that amazing team. So next slide, please. So I want to start by talking about how we started planning for enforcement, because I think that's really where the conversation needs to begin. Because if you're like me, when you got these regulations, it's a lot. So the first thing that we did, of course, is we had our enforcement pass, because CalRecycle said we had to. But even once we have the enforcement, how do we actually enforce this? So we started talking about what our plan and process is going to be, step by step. What exactly does enforcement mean? What are we actually enforcing? Like, what does a violation look like? Who finds these violations? Who's going to do all these things? What tools do we need? Do we need forms? Do we need postcards? Are we using an online database? So we started this whole process, and I'm going to kind of walk you through some of this. So it might be really helpful for you to start this process too, if you haven't already. Next slide, please. So as we went about this, we actually created an enforcement plan. So this is a document that I created just to help me get my thoughts from my brain onto paper so I can share them with my team, and so that we are all looking at this and doing the same thing. Because heaven forbid one staff goes out to a business and they're like, oh, you're all good, no violations. And then a different staff goes out next month and goes, you know what, you've got 4 violations. It's really important that everybody is on the same page, because there's differences between when you're out at a business and you're looking at that. There's some violations that the property owner is going to be responsible for versus that the tenant is going to be responsible for, and knowing those differences is going to be essential. So I would recommend that you sit down and you put together an enforcement plan. Our plan, our 2024 plan is still draft at this point. We have a 2022, 2023 plan that we just talk about it, lots and lots of reminders before we get to enforcement. Our 2024 plan is the one that meets that. Okay, first violation is the NOV. It's still in draft form, so I don't feel comfortable sharing that yet. We're trying to solidify a few things to make sure that it is going to meet all of our goals to get everything done here. But something like this is going to be essential. Next step, please, or next slide, please. So this is one thing that we put together just to help, again, our brains get organized as far as what does enforcement look like? How do we follow up on things, right? So we put this flow chart together just to allow us to figure out how we're going to be doing this next year. So whether or not we get a complaint or whether or not our staff is out in the field and notices something that's a violation, this is the flow chart of how we follow up on that. So, you know, we notify one of our inspection staff goes out, they look at the issue. Okay, is it all clear? Is there no actual issue? Then never mind, we don't need to do anything. If you look at it and notice there's an issue, this is the process that we're going to follow. And what we've decided to do is we're going to try to go out every 30 days just to find out what's going on, so that we get an extra little step in there before they get an actual fine. When we find a notice of find a violation, we give them the notice of violation, but then we come back in another month to check again, so they get another little reminder in the meantime. We also send out postcards, and you'll see a little bit more about that further in the presentation. Next slide, please. So these are our amazing staff. So we stumbled upon something rather amazing, and I don't know how many other jurisdictions have this as well. If you guys have a wastewater treatment plant, you may have a FOG inspection process for your food service establishments. So FOG, that's fats, oils, and grease. So for the city of Davis, and I know a lot of other jurisdictions, we have to go out to all food service establishments and make sure that they are properly disposing of their fats, oils, and grease, that they have their grease interceptors, and they have, the FOG is being taken care of properly and everything. So we already have staff that are going out to restaurants. So when we realized that, we realized if you're already going out here with the checklist to make sure that restaurants are doing certain things, could you take a checklist about SB 1383 too? So this is the focus that I want to talk about at this presentation, is how we're doing this with restaurants. I know there's a whole lot of other inspection stuff and enforcement stuff for SB 1383, and I'm not going to focus on that in this presentation. I'm only going to talk about restaurants. But this has been working so well, is working with our FOG inspectors, giving them tools, and they can go out and check for SB 1383 violations. Next slide, please. So when they go out to a restaurant or any other food service industry, it could be a cafe, it could be a coffee shop, anything like that that serves food or beverages. We created these binders with some of our SB 1383 grant funds. And a majority of the stuff that's in here that was not paid for by the 1383 grant, don't worry, CalRecycle, is about pre-treatment. So, how do you make sure that you're not polluting the the sewer with various things. There's some stormwater compliance information, there's some water compliance information, but then there's a whole chunk of stuff all about SB 1383. And that's of course what we paid for with grant funds. But we've got checklists in here. We've got, what exactly is required by businesses. We've got recycling guides, we've got training guides, all sorts of stuff, so that this binder lives on their shelf in the restaurant. And anytime our staff goes there for anything, their once a year inspection or anything else, the first question is, okay, show me your compliance binder. Have you been keeping your records? Have you been doing your trainings? Oh, you know what? Page 4 has been updated because of a new city ordinance. Let's just change out page 4 so that all the restaurants know where their environmental compliance binder is. It has all the environmental regulations that they need to know for the city of Davis, the carryout bag ordinance, the styrofoam ban, anything else, right? It's all right there. So it's very easy for them to know and to find, just to make all these inspections easier and to make it easier on their business so that everything is in one spot. Next slide, please. I'm going to show you a few of the pages that are in here. So we give them this, what is SB 1383? This also checks that box as far as education goes, the kinds of things we have to talk to businesses about, like mentioning like climate change and mentioning air quality and health effects and stuff like that. Then of course we give them a recycling guide, because what kind of a recycling program would we be if we didn't give them a recycling guide? Next slide, please. These other 2 pages I'm pretty fond of. I think it's really helpful. This is the actual checklist. Okay, so because I'm sure you all get that question, am I compliant with SB 1383? I love getting that questions from businesses. I'm like, how would I know? I can look at your service and go, yeah, you've got service. That's fantastic. Are you using it? Are you training your employees? Do you have bins where you need to have bins? This is what they need to look at to figure out if they're compliant for SB 1383, at least in the city of Davis. Davis does things a little bit different with collection. But these checklists help them to figure out if they're going to be compliant with SB 1383. We also give them a record keeping form, and this form can be updated by our staff each year when they go to do their inspections, so that they can say, hey, look, yeah, I did training for my employees. I verbally provide training, or I give flyers, and they can mark this form out so our staff can look at this and go, hey, good job, you guys are compliant. I see that you've been keeping your records. Look, you've been doing your regular contamination monitoring of your indoor bins. You know, if you found contamination or not, did you follow up with more training with your employees, just to make things, again, easier for them to follow these regulations. Just because we're thinking about SB 1383 all the time in our minds doesn't mean that they are. I know it's a shock, but however we can make things easier for them, that's our goal. Okay, next slide, please. The other thing that we did is we gave our FOG inspectors these inspection reports. So these are actually done on, I should have had a copy. It's like a carbon copy paper thing, so that our staff keeps the top paper copy, and then a copy of the inspection report goes to the business. So they actually leave their inspection with a paper copy of something. And then of course our staff follow up with an email, sometimes a letter with the same information, of course with all the FOG information as well, listing the notices of violation, listing exactly what they need to do to change in that restaurant. Like, yeah, you're almost there, but this one bin back there needs a label or whatever it is. On these forms, we can keep track. How many times have we been out here? Obviously, this form is the one you can say at the top if there's going to be a violation or no violation, because if there is a violation, the next time they come for an inspection, we're still going to be using the same form, right? But we want to be able to say, hey, no violation found this time, so good job. So here's your your green copy, like your green light, you're all good. So this is very important. The other part that our staff really wanted to have added to these forms is make the business sign it, because it's nice when you go out there and you do an inspection, they go, oh, we didn't receive that report. Nobody was there to receive that report. I don't know what you're talking about, this inspection that happened. It's like, oh, really? Because you have a signature here from your employee that actually received a copy of this report. We have that, so we know that your staff received it. Next slide, please. Then the center of this form, this is all the part that talks about what the violations are. So we put this together to make it very clear the difference between the property owner's responsibility in case, like a lot of commercial facilities are leased, right? You have got a shopping center, and maybe that business that's in the shopping center, they have no control over their waste enclosure. They have no control over their waste service. So they're not responsible for that top part, but they need to talk to their property manager. If they don't have sufficient service for recycling, they need to talk to their property manager. So that needs to be made clear. Of course, the business responsibility is a big section there. And we made a difference between if you're looking at bins on the inside versus on the outside. So yeah, if things are not being sorted outside in the waste enclosure, maybe that's not their fault because they share that waste enclosure with multiple businesses, or maybe they don't. But for some reason, when you're inside, everything is perfectly sorted, but when it gets outside, why is it all mixed together? Is the staff that's emptying at the end of the day, are they not doing a good job? So it makes it a little easier to have these conversations with businesses. Okay, next slide, please. And then the follow-up. So after the inspection takes place, I get a notification that our staff has done the inspection. I send out a postcard, and it looks kind of like this, and it's folded in half. Actually, it looks like these right here. They get folded in half and mailed out. So every 2 weeks, they receive some information from us. So they get their inspection. 2 weeks later, they get a postcard from me saying, hi, you almost did good, but not quite. You had a few things you need to work on. These are the exact things you need to work on. We'll be back on this date for a follow-up inspection. Then the FOG inspectors go out again, and it's the same process again. They go through this, they get the checklist, they receive a follow-up email right away from the FOG inspectors, then they get a postcard from me. We keep on repeating this process until they're in compliance. So right now we're doing this process 3 or 4 times before we send a notice of violation. Of course, starting next year, the first violation is a notice of violation. So we're tweaking that time frame. Next slide, please. So I said that we do lots of notices to businesses. I'm not kidding. Like by the time they get in compliance, it still takes about 4 steps, sometimes 4 different, interfaces with staff. It's staff intensive. If you're taking home nothing from this, this is staff intensive. And as you guys know, with food service establishments or with a lot of businesses, staff turnover is going to be an issue. So our job is never going to be done. I will never put myself out of business, which is, good and bad. I wish that, we could go to a business and go, hey, good job. We were here last year and everything's still perfect. That's never going to happen. But we're going to keep on trying. So yes, we do send letters and emails to the restaurants after we do the FOG inspections. And they get these little notices of violation that have all the details about, what exactly they did, what do they need to do to remedy it, how long they have to remedy it, and what the fines are. And we continue this repeat process every 30 days. When we do need to send fines, those go to code enforcement, which is in the police department. So at that point, it leaves our department and goes over to code enforcement. And I'm curious, I'm sure a lot of other cities do that as well. Maybe it's just us, I don't know. So there's that whole process. And then of course we have to save copies of everything, right? So we've got our paper copies that we save. Before I mail out these postcards, every week I take pictures of the postcards and I save those pictures in our online software that we use. And I'll show that in just a moment, so that literally every step of the process is documented. Next slide, please. And I'll show you a little bit about this online software. So we use Lucidity. Lucidity is a asset management tool that the city has been using for, I don't even know how long, a very, very long time, just to keep track of. It's like a work order system. We use it for water leaks and sewer repairs and all sorts of things. We've tweaked the some of the stuff with Lucidity so that we can use it for inspections and following up on inspections. So we've created some special stuff on here so that we can do SB 1383 inspections. So when I open Lucidity, it looks kind of like this. And I took out all the columns that show like addresses and phone numbers and stuff, because we don't want to share all that information about the businesses that are in non-compliance right now. But I can open this up and see who I need to send reminder postcards for, when the fog inspectors were out there. Did they issue a tag? Did they issue a notice of violation? What's going on? Are they in violation? Or do they have all issues resolved? Next slide, and I can show you some of the details of what we add into Lucidity. So when we open up a tag, we can keep track of, the business name, their address, obviously important. Did we issue a tag? Did we issue an NOV? On the next slide, you'll see the stuff that our fog inspectors are entering. So this is what the fog inspectors enter data into when they come back from doing an inspection. They take their checklist, they log it into this online platform. Can you go to the next slide, please? And then, thank you, perfect. So these are their inspection findings. So are all issues resolved? No or yes? We're looking for yeses. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of no's. We're working on it. And then they can keep track of exactly what the problem is. So you'll see some stuff on here that's specific to Davis. Yes, Davis does require organic bins in bathrooms if there's paper towels. I know SB 1383 doesn't. We do, because I know that's organic waste. And dang, is there a lot of paper towels out there. So we require it. But this is how we keep track of what happened for our inspections. And in this online software is how I upload the pictures of the postcards that we send out, and we can keep notes of exactly our staff time even, so we can calculate how much time is spent on all these. It's a fantastic program. It takes a little while to learn and to enter the data, but it's a great tool to have. Next slide, please. So this sounds amazing. Is it a lot of work? Oh my gosh, yes. This has been a lot of work. And I'm only talking about restaurants here, right? So what still needs some work with our enforcement process? Is it perfect? Oh my gosh, no. We need more staff. We have some staffing shortages here. This is, we have a team of 3 part-time staff that do the restaurant inspections. We have, oh my gosh, how many inspections have they done? I want to say they've done about 300 inspections. They have maybe 34 that are compliant now, and there's a lot more that are still on ongoing inspections. Those numbers are just iffy. I'd have to actually go online and double check. But it's time intensive, and this is just for food service establishments. So Davis is a population of 70,000, just to give you an example of how large our city is. We do have a highly variable population with the university nearby. A lot of our residents move out for the summer. We don't have a ton of businesses, but we do have a lot of restaurants. So, our staff time has been a challenge to have enough staff time to do this kind of enforcement. Because how about all the other businesses? How about all the other enforcement that's involved with SB 1383, right? This is just like one piece of how we're doing this. The other challenge that I mentioned is staff turnover at businesses, because, oh my gosh, yeah, people come and leave jobs in certain industries more so than others. So it is constant reminders of how to do SB 1383 and how to stay, in compliance. Of course, COVID made everything tough. Finding staff, holding on to staff is difficult. Businesses are struggling. So I've heard several people mention, yeah, how about the politics of enforcement? Oh my gosh, you are not kidding. Because everybody loves the idea of environmental laws, but then when it comes time to actually say, I'm very sorry, we've been as nice as we can be, the state says, I have to fine you. I cannot do anything about that at this point. This is state law. We have to issue a fine. That's going to be fun next year. We have not issued a fine for SB 1383 yet. We have issued notices of violation, and that has been pretty much good enough to get people to be in compliant. But starting next year, that's going to be different, right? We actually have to issue fines. So that's going to be fun for all of us, I'm sure. The other thing is, it is difficult to keep track of fines when you have different departments that are using different online systems. So we're using Lucity for all of our inspections and for our notices of violation. But when it goes over to code enforcement, that's a different department. They use a different online system. So it would be great if they use the same system, but they use a different software. So it makes it challenging. And we're working through those situations. We have not figured everything out yet. I can't wait to hear from the city of Sacramento, because I know they've got an amazing program. So we're all learning, right? We're all building this plane as we're flying it. So it's been quite the process. I'm sure you guys all share that sentiment. Next slide, please. I think that's all that I had. Yeah, that's it. We have a lot of these resources online. Obviously, I don't put our checklists and our enforcement plan and stuff online, but we do have on our webpage, davisrecycling.org, we do have examples of waivers and a lot of other forms and stuff that might be helpful to other jurisdictions. I mean, we're all doing this. If we have something that works, we should definitely be sharing, because this is complicated. But yeah, that's all I had to share. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Jennifer. In the interest of time, I think we're going to go on to our next presenter and then just have a larger kind of Q&A session at the end. So with that, I would like to pass it on to our CalRecycle staff member, Jill, to introduce our next presenter. Take it away, Jill.
Thank you. It is my pleasure to work with and introduce Erin Treadwell with the City of Sacramento. Erin has worked for local, regional, and state governments for the majority of her 30-year career, primarily as a public information and outreach manager. In 2012, she joined the City of Sacramento, her hometown, as the Outreach and Media Manager for the Recycling and Solid Waste Division. Within a year, she was managing projects such as implementing the first city text reminder program for residential collections. In 2016, she took on the city's plastic bag ban, from drafting of code to full implementation. That effort won statewide and national awards for education and outreach. In 2020, she was promoted to Program Manager of the Commercial Waste Compliance Unit to manage commercial waste from haulers to generators to food recovery and all things SB 1383 related. She likes to say, if you talk about it long enough, they'll put you to work on it. And it's my pleasure to introduce Erin.
Hey, thank you, Jill. Hope everyone can hear me. I appreciate Jennifer's saying, we have a great program. We have a good program, but I've learned a lot from what I've seen today from our other presenters. So, again, hopefully we can all pick the best of the things that work for our jurisdictions and go from there. My focus today is going to be on how we do commercial enforcement in the city of Sacramento for 1383. So let's just jump on in and go to the next slide. A little bit of background for this for you all on the city. We are an open market system, so we do not have any exclusive franchises or exclusive zones. We have 4 large haulers that are franchised and to service are just north of 7,000 commercial properties in the city, and the names probably look familiar to many of you. So they can, any of our commercial generators can contract with any of those 4 haulers to provide all 3 or 1 of their services. They can split it between 2 of them. It makes it a very competitive market related to commercial hauling. Within our 7,000 properties, we are broken out to about 1,200 multifamilies. We have 122 tier 1 property or generators. We have 58 tier 2s. And within that, we've issued about 2,100 SB 1383 waivers, but more than half of those waivers have been for the smallest generators, the actual under 10 de minimis waivers. So we do not offer any blue bin waivers. So let's go to the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about the decision points for why we set up our enforcement program the way we have. A couple of things occurred in the city that were kind of unique. The first one is up until 2021, we were part of a joint powers authority with the County of Sacramento. It was called the Solid Waste Authority, and it had been operating for 20 plus years. And the SWA regulated all commercial waste hauling in both jurisdictions. And I don't know how many folks know, but the unincorporated part of Sacramento County is as big and as urbanized as the city of Sacramento. So it is, I think, one of the, like, within the top 5 urbanized unincorporated counties in the nation. So think of it as almost 2 cities really working together. And so they handled all of commercial waste hauling, also, you know, the initiation of enforcement on 1826 and all of that. But in 2019, the county said, you know what, everything is a heavy lift. SB 1383 is a heavy lift. We want to just take care of our own jurisdiction. And so the JPA began to dissolve. What that meant for the city is we had to set up our own commercial waste unit, of which I'm proud to be the manager of. It also meant that the franchise fees that normally would have gone to the JPA and then are used for the management of the programs were now going to come to the city of Sacramento, at least those that are generated within our jurisdiction. So now we have to set up a new program, but we've got some funding to do it with. So knowing we had that happening, and knowing 1383 was a large part of what we were going to have to deal with, we were able to design a program from scratch. And that was really, it turned out to be kind of fortuitous. We didn't have to try and figure out how are we going to do this on top of everything else. Although that was a slight piece of the decision making, but we knew we had to come up with something, but we had some resources to do it with. So that's happening on one side. On the other side, about 12 years ago, a former solid waste manager was fortuitous, felt that we were not getting, when we had any kind of issue, solid waste issue that required code enforcement to manage it, we were not getting much traction. We were not a priority. So he was able to establish having 2, and then eventually it grew to 3 code officers, FTEs, that are in the recycling and solid waste division. They're our staff. They're just outside in their cubicles from me here. And they manage only solid waste, illegal dumping activities and issues related to that. So we already kind of had that as a little bit of an enforcement capability within our division. So when it came time to designing how we implement enforcement on the commercial side, we had to look at that. Okay, we've got some funding. Do we consider adding auditors that would go out and do the inspections and the education? Do we consider contracting with EMD, who does a lot of the same kinds of inspections, or, you know, there's certainly a correlation with some of the work they're doing. Or do we train our officers and maybe expand that unit in what we need to do related to food waste? And obviously we chose option 3. It was both economical for us, and because food inspection was new to everybody, there weren't a host of experts out there. We felt it made a lot of sense. I mean, our officers are trained to inspect on a lot of different things. Food seemed to be something that would be certainly they would be capable to do. So that's what we did. We added 3 more officers, so we have 6 total, 2 who are dedicated to our 1383 commercial activities and will eventually be part of the residential activities as well. And then we repurposed 1 analyst to provide a lot of the administrative paperwork situation that these inspections require. So that's a little bit about how we came to create the system we have. Let's go ahead to the next. Great. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit what we do related to our inspections, and I focused this presentation really on kind of our waiver inspection piece. There's certainly a lot of different aspects, but was trying to, you know, keep it somewhat focused. So we began issuing waivers for 1383 as a jurisdiction in 2021. We actually did this before we split from the county, but we knew we had to get ahead of this, and we worked with the county. One thing I don't have here to share, but we'll talk a little bit about is we have recyclists, as I know many jurisdictions do, and so did the county. And we have them create a custom form for us and for the county that is basically the waiver request. So that way, when folks are asking for a waiver, the form they fill out is actually in the recyclist world, and we're able to match it with their record and have it all part and parcel of one record. So that has proven to be very helpful for us. So when a generator would submit a waiver, we were doing desktop reviews. We are deep into COVID, and so everything was a desktop review. And as part of that, they have to declare how they determined, what their de minimis, that they're eligible for this. And so we took all that information. I will say we had to make a decision to do a snapshot review. We knew a lot of places probably would not have been de minimis, except for the fact that it's COVID and they only have 2 people in the office, if that. So, but what we were able to do with our waiver program with Recyclist is we can mark it as high, medium, or low. So what we call the wobblers, ones that would most likely maybe not really be eligible for a waiver, but by basically being closed, they sort of are. We would grant it, but we would also mark it as high, and that'll come into play a little later here. So in any case, like you said, we have over 2,000 waivers that have come through. I do want to say that we denied out the gate over 300 waivers. So it wasn't an automatic, really. So there was a lot of denials to start with, but we also made it ineligible. Like if you were a food business, you were just ineligible. You can't even apply for a waiver. We aren't going to even look at you. But this was for non-food based businesses. So the process when it comes time to an inspection on waivers is like I said, we email to the lucky generator and say, hey, remember that waiver you submitted in 2021? It's time for the inspection. And one of the things they had to certify, that like check and sign and certify on the waiver, was they understood that they were going to get an on-site inspection within 5 years. So what we do is we email them to let them know an inspection is coming or due. We call and follow up and set that date and time. And then we send them materials in advance. We send them a copy of their waiver saying, hey, this is what you said you were doing, and this is what you said you had done to deserve the de minimis. So we're going to look for that. We also send them a waste study guide, how to do a waste study. So should they have lost the waste study they claimed that they did when they provided the waiver, they can do another one. We're giving a really basic walkthrough, and there's some samples up here, some screenshots of what that study guide is. We give them an inspection checklist. This is what we're going to be looking for. I like to think, it's all part of education with these generators, but we're giving them the test questions, and we're giving them the answers. We want to get them to success, so that when we go out there to do the inspection, they have all the tools they need well in advance to pass it, or to at least understand if they don't pass it, why they wouldn't. So, all right, let's go ahead to the next slide. Cool. So when we do our inspections, we do let them know as part of the checklist, we are going to look at everything while we are there. It's really, really hard to look at organics just in a vacuum. And, when we're there, we're checking out wherever the food's going to be, the break rooms, we do, lid flips on the dumpsters, all of those sorts of things. Our code officers have iPads that with a checklist on it that they walk through, and that document becomes part of the recyclist record. And so right now we are not in an enforcement mode, we are in an inspection mode, and yes, they're code enforcement officers, but but they're out there, you know, being informative, chatty, educational, that sort of thing. And then when the inspection is done, within 2 to 3 days, they'll get an email from us, and it will either confirm that the waiver is still good and they're good for the next 5 years, or it will revoke the waiver because you know, they found food, and so there's that. And then the most common issues we see, you know, we go out there and we see, you know, the organics isn't an issue. They were correct on that, but we do find some other issues, and some of the most common ones we find is they don't have enough recycling, or they have a recycle bin in the back, but they have nothing inside in the break room, so that's not happening, you know, in that, or they don't have any education or any signage or anything like that posted. So in our confirming, or in our email that we send them right after the inspection, you know, we let them know, hey, you know, please fix this in the next 30 days. And again, we're not in an enforcement mode yet. We're just more in we're asking you nicely right now to please correct this in 30 days. Most of the corrections are things that they can take a picture of and send it to us in email, or if they have to get organics, they need to just send us a copy of the service agreement. So we are not having to go out and do a second physical inspection on site. It's at that point, it's just an email back and forth. And again, we're not in enforcement. However, if they don't comply, then it does turn into an enforcement issue. And this is where it's advantageous for us to have our code officers doing it, because there's no handoff. They just move into a different mode, a different process, issuing an NOV and walking that down that path where we're not reliant on another division, department, group of staff who have to kind of pick up the pieces and put it into whatever priorities they're already dealing with. So it's very seamless, and it's been proven to be advantageous for us to have it set up in that way. So let's go to the next slide. Great. So this is some other inspection data. So we began our inspections this year, and we've done 187, and 113 of those were waiver. We're going out and checking on waivers. We are also at the same time doing our tier 1 edible food inspections. We're at 59. We think we're going to get all of those done this year, which would be great. And we, of course, we do inspections based on complaints, and we have the great joy of being the jurisdiction where CalRecycle staff live and work and play. So we have a lot of folks who contact us about things that they find are problematic and are much more aware of what should and shouldn't be going on. So we've got 15 complaints, and that might be low, I don't know, but we do know where some of them come from, and that's okay. It gives us an opportunity to go out and have that conversation with those generators. Mostly it's around multifamily and event spaces, but anyways. What I do want to point out, though, is this NOV post-inspection, the 2. So of all the inspections we have done, the only 2 so far, although I believe I heard today a third one's teeing up for this, only 2 have started down an enforcement road with an NOV. And both of those NOVs, once they were issued, the generator came into compliance. So we only had to really go to first base on an enforcement action with 2 of the 187 generators we've done an inspection on. So we think that's a good sign. Related to the waivers specifically, as I mentioned, when we grant the waivers or look at them, and if there's ones we call wobblers, if you will, we'll mark them as high. So when we began our inspection program, we started with our the ones we thought had probably the highest chance of maybe not being in compliance once COVID kind of subsided. So and we wanted to check on those. So after our 113 inspections, about 64% were sustained or approved, however you want to define that, and about 41 or 36% we had to revoke because there was clearly more than 20 gallons of organics being generated on the site. So, all right, the next slide. So we do just quick mention on multifamilies. We they're complaint driven for now. When we get complaints about them and go out and take a look at them, we did pre-review them when we were setting up our inspection program before we had it fully fleshed out, and we were training our code officers. One of the things we had them do is they went out to all 1,200 of our multifamily properties and just did a space review. Took some photos and just checked on how many of these locations, particularly in our downtown core, are going to have space issues. And that really helped us when we launched the program, and we got a lot of requests from multifamilies. Hey, I don't have enough space for this. We were able to say, well, yeah, we think you do. And here's the photos we took to show that. So let's have a conversation, but yeah, you've got space. So it prevented us from having to deal with a lot of erroneous waivers related to space by having done that pre-review on the multifamily. So, and then next slide is a picture of our intrepid crew. And our analyst Leo is taking took the picture, so he's not in it, but that's the crew. And then that is it. I'm ready for questions.
Thank you so much, Erin. Darren, if you could move back to our Q&A slide. We would like to open it up for our third and final Q&A session. Again, for a reminder, please submit your questions to the Q&A pane. And if you cannot unmute yourself, please submit your question to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov. Once unmuted, please state your name, affiliation, and question. Katie?
All right. First up, I have a couple of questions from Ruben Hernandez. Ruben, you should be able to unmute. Please go ahead and state your name and affiliation and ask your first question.
Yeah, hi, thank you. I'm Ruben Hernandez with Marine Sanitary Service. We are a waste hauler here in Marin County. And I had a question for Jennifer about your compliance binders. They seem to be a great tool. And I'd like to know how many of those binders did you create and distribute? And what was the cost to have those distributed? Thank you.
So thank you for your question. So we're only doing about 30 or so of them at a time so that we don't have a massive stock of binders. They're actually really cheap. We just buy binders, kind of like a large box of binders at a time. We print all the flyers that we're going to put inside in-house. So we just print them from our printers, and we put them into plastic sheets, which I know plastic is not great, but we need these to last when people with wet or sticky fingers are turning the pages. It's really cheap. It did not cost at all. The binders were probably the most expensive part of it, and binders are maybe like $5 a binder. So it was a really cheap outreach tool that lasts. So we've been pleased with the process.
And what was the final cost for those?
I don't have a final cost because we're just printing a few at a time. So it's just the cost of the binders and plastic sheets. So that's the only cost that there is. I'd have to look it up, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but it's literally very cheap.
Up next, I have another question from Ruben Hernandez. Ruben, please go ahead and unmute and ask your second question.
Yeah, thank you. My second question is for Erin, and actually it's a two-part question, Erin. Thank you for that very informative presentation. It was great. The first question is, how are you getting the complaints to you? What's the process of those complaints being reported to you?
There's two ways they come to us. We have a waste compliance at cityofsacramento.org email, so they'll come to us that way. from folks who know that that's our email and they can reach us that way. All our generators know that, but there's some other folks in the community who know that, or through 311. So if the 311 gets a complaint, they'll forward it to us that way as well. So those are the two main ways so far.
And what's 311?
311 is a service. Larger jurisdictions tend to have it. It's akin to 911, but it's usually all about the jurisdictional or the services that are in a city or in a county. So if you wanted to report a street light that's out, or animal control situation, or anything along kind of your civic services, you would call 311, at least in the city of Sacramento, and you could report that. And then it's dispatched to whatever city department would be handling, you know, the pothole or the loose dog in the street or those sorts of things. So.
Okay, thank you. And my second question was, how many space waivers have you issued so far for multifamily dwellings? Can imagine that there are those many multifamily dwellings with space constraints.
It's not as high as I thought, and I'll probably have to get back with you. I can tell you I believe it's less than 50. Oh, hold on, I have staff texting me now. They think it's less than 10, which was surprising. We actually thought we'd have a higher number despite some of our downtown construction or downtown configurations, but I may have that number for you shortly, but it's quite low.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Gonna go back and read some of the, oh, sorry, we actually have a new question that's come in from Konya Vivanti. Konya, you should be able to unmute yourself now. Please go ahead and state your name and affiliation and ask your question.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, I'm Konya Vivanti with the City of Lakewood down here in Southern California. And I'm curious, Jennifer, or any of the other panelists, how do you deal with enforcement for like a strip mall that has multiple tenants in it? And maybe only 3 of them subscribe to trash service, recycling, organics, and the property owner is not really helping at all. He doesn't want to cam all the tenants, but they all have to pay for trash. So are you having any kind of situation like that? Because I seem to be running into that quite often.
Yeah, we don't run into that too much. Our situation's a little unique. Recycling service is available at no additional cost if you have trash service. So they can have as many recycling carts as they need to. It's also been required in Davis since 2016, organics as well. So it's not new to us. We do have the situation occasionally where they have their one free organics cart, but they have 4 restaurants. They need more than 1 cart, and they don't want to pay for more than 1 cart. So what we'll often see is, the property owner for the strip mall will have, either the garbage service, like they'll pay for it, or the compactor or whatever. And then they will have each restaurant will get charged for their own organic service. And so like, this is the cart for this restaurant and their name is written on it, and this cart is for that restaurant and their name is written on it. That way it's easier to keep track if someone is contaminating the carts. There's a little more ownership for who is using that cart, and then the property owner will take the bill for that additional cart and they'll bill that restaurant directly. So we do see that happening, and that's been pretty successful. But we don't charge for recycling, but it would be the same concept, is that whoever needs it is the one that pays for it.
In the city, we're drafting code. It just went through its first approval that a property owner of strip mall is the one ultimately responsible for all the waste services at that site. So they need to, they can't say, oh, my tenants have to do it. So we're hoping to eliminate that issue. It's come up a couple times, but we're going to make it very clear that they can't just push it onto the tenant, the property owners, and that is who we would enforce upon if they were out of compliance.
Great, thank you.
Thanks all. Up next, I have a question from Christine Williamson. Christine, please go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and affiliation, and then ask your question.
Hello, this is Christine Williamson from the Kern County Public Works Department. Aaron, I just had a question for you regarding the waiver inspections. When you have a customer who has service 2 or even 3 times a week, do you have more than one inspection, or are you reducing the amount of allowable organics you observe? So, say if they're picked up 3 times a week, do you only allow for 6.67 gallons of organics that are observed in the trash, or do you just go multiple times to cover the whole week to see what they?
Oh, gotcha. I see what you're saying. What we do try to time our inspections to when their service day is, and trying to do it before the service day. I don't know how we've been factoring that. We really only have one inspection, regardless of the number of pickups. But we do try to time it for what would be the heaviest day, if you will, that they would potentially have waste based on when their normal pickups are. So.
Does that answer your question, Christine?
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a good question. We just wouldn't go out, and we can't go out multiple times unless there's a real infraction that's happening and we need to do some sort of additional enforcement.
We've kind of got our something that we've kind of established, but we were just curious as to what other jurisdictions were doing in situations like that.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and start reading some of the answered questions out of our chat section for a little while. I'll try to get through as many of those so that they can get on the recording of this webinar. So first up, I have a question from Corey Beavers, who asked, how are you handling the politics of enforcing fines on businesses that are struggling economically? Does your city council support the issuance of fines to non-compliant businesses? Adrian responded, great question. I will not be able to provide an answer until we actually start issuing fines. We're in the outreach phase. Our fine schedule will take effect January 1st, 2024. And that is, again, the date for mandatory enforcement. Do any of our other presenters have anything to add to that?
I mean, we're very conscious of that. It is there are some political winds that can blow around 1383. We have not issued fines yet. We feel we're giving folks a lot of cure periods and ability to come into compliance, and so that if and when we do have to issue a fine, and if that were to come up as a concern with an elected official, we could demonstrate all the things we've done to get them into compliance and to understand, what we've done, why we've done it, how much time we've given, all the technical assistance we've provided. So that's to us the best way to inoculate against it. But it is something that we do factor in when we're making some decisions.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin.
I agree with that. We give as much assistance as we can. And so just like Erin said, you can point to all what you have provided. Most of the grant money that we've gotten from CalRecycle for the 1383 implementation, we have put into assisting our organic waste generators. So we have an online form that businesses can go to and request free organics bins, recycling bins, labels, posters, all this kind of stuff, so that, you know, if they are non-compliant, here's the tools to become compliant. Here's online videos, here's flyers, here's, you know, all this information. We're getting the videos translated into multiple languages. So whatever it is that you're not compliant for, here is exactly what you need to do. It's free, just do the stuff. And that way, when they come to council and they complain about the fines, my goal is that we can preload council with that conversation. Like, by the way, fines are coming. Did you know that we've already given them all this free stuff? They're just legit not doing it. And to make that conversation go a little bit easier. But yeah, we'll see next year. I think we're all going to be suffering from this. So it'll be fun.
All right, thanks, Jennifer. Now I'm going to pass things back over to Alexis.
Hi all, thanks again for fielding those questions. And we're right at the end of the hour. So just a quick reminder for those of you who maybe didn't get some questions answered or thought of some more, please send those questions to slcp.organics@calrecycle.ca.gov. I wanted to give a huge shout out and thank you to our panelists and all of our attendees who participated here today. These chats wouldn't be possible without you. We truly appreciate the level of engagement from our stakeholders. A few quick notes. We will not be hosting an SB 1383 chat with CalRecycle for November or December, but we will resume chats in January or February, focusing on topics including contamination monitoring, edible food recovery, and capacity planning. If you have any questions, recommendations, or suggestions for chats in the future, please send them to the SLCP inbox. Thank you all again. Unless there's any closing remarks from Kara or anybody else, which I'm not seeing. All right. Oh, hey, Kara. Any closing remarks?
Hey, I just again would like to thank everybody for all the hard work. Thank you so much to our presenters. I thought today was incredible sharing. And if you all are interested in first quarter 2024, we'll bring together another group of jurisdictions that are conducting enforcement and do some more sharing. So I'm really excited as we move into the new year, and I'm so proud of all of the jurisdictions and all of your hard work. You are making a difference, and we really appreciate it. So looking forward to continuing our collaboration. Thanks, Alexis.
All right. Thank you, Kara. And thank you, everyone. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.